It's Jay. Hope you guys are doing well. So this will probably be my last video of 2024, and I wanted to wrap it up the year with kind of the journey I started with from the Retro Pocket 4 to Mini Plus, and then got a bunch of Ambernic devices here, or a couple of them so far, a couple as in three, because that SP, the V, and the H, and also have the Retro Pocket 5. And not on screen at the moment, but here it is the Odin 2 Pro that I have. So I had a lot of devices and gained a lot of experience of being in this kind of retro gaming community, going back and playing a bunch of games that I was nostalgic for and games that I didn't really finish and I wanted to try again. But all that being said, I wanted to give you guys sort of the handhelds that I thought were the best of this year. So let's get started. I hope you guys can subscribe and like this video. It really does help me a lot to continue making videos like this. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, so hit that bell notification as well. So yeah, I wanted to break it down in terms of pricing. I think that's probably the best way to do that, so that you get a good informed decision really to, which one you want to buy. Do you want to buy multiple, and that kind of philosophy. I think if you can afford it, you definitely want to try to get multiple devices, as in like two, kind of like a main device and then a secondary in-between device, as in like, hey, I'm out and about, I'm doing something, and I want to bring, the Mini Plus, for example. This is a device, this is my first actual retro gaming device that I ever ordered before starting this journey. And this thing was awesome. I didn't know much about this stuff back then, and I just watched a couple of videos and I was like, okay, cool, I'll order this off Amazon and see where it goes. And then I fell in love with this thing. It's just super cool, just minimal, small, like compact, and had a beautiful screen. The resolution was pretty good. I mean, this is basically playing up to PS1 games. So that's when I started realizing, man, there's a lot more going on. There's more out there, right? The Retro Pocket 4, the 3, the Odins, all those kind of things. And, as things progressed, things got better. But so, the Miu Mini Plus, I missed on the boat on the original Miu Mini. They have a Miu Mini V4 now. So if you wanted to get like a smaller version of the Miu Mini, you can. I just think that the bigger one's kind of like the best version, or something in between, like the Trim UI Brick, which I do have on order, and hopefully I'll be able to get to review that one. But because it's not here and it's already mid-December at this point, can't really consider it as part of 2024 for me anyways. So the Miu Mini Plus, 2024, still amazing device. I still love it. The thing is, like, I have so many other devices now, which I'll get to in just a second, that kind of take the place of this device. And it's a vertical handheld, so Miu may or may not like it, right? Especially this is like more of a nostalgia buy, just because it looks like a Game Boy or a modern Game Boy. It has some nice amenities. Onion OS is not installed by default. You have to flash it yourself, so there's a little bit of learning curve. But I think this is a great kind of initial buy if you're looking to get into it, looking to learn about how to flash, how to set up your SD card and all of that stuff. I think that's a really good starting point. Now, some of the other good starting points are really these devices here, all the Ambernic devices. They kind of compete in that same price range too, right? That $50 to $100 range of devices. And, these are where kind of you want to look for, hey, I want a cheap. So these three devices from Ambernic, they're all pretty good in terms of like, performance and whatnot, because they really all had the same chip. And that's when you have to think about, okay, well, are these a step up from each other? Well, they have different chips. And really, at that point, it's more about the form factor and what you want out of it. And so if you want something that's a little bit bigger, right, because all of these are essentially bigger than the Miu Mini Plus. This one is obviously just the very, the smallest, most compact, etc. The Ambernics, you notice that 2 of the 3 here have RGB sticks. Now the sticks are not like amazing or crazy. They're not as good as, some of the ones I'm going to mention next, like the Retro Pocket 5 or anything, but these are still, you still get sticks. So they're great to have an alternative way to, control your character and whatnot. So this is really good in that aspect, right? And you want a horizontal one, you got it here. You want a vertical one, you got it here. You have all the options, and you even have a SP lookalike with the SP 35XX SP. One thing to note is that you can tell that the screens are a little bit different, right? The SP here is a 3.5 inch. These are the 40s, so they have the 40. They're like XX40, 40XX. And so these are a little bit bigger in terms of the screen size, right? So these are 4-inch devices, but they're the same resolution, so a little bit less pixel density, all that stuff. There's trade-offs in all of those, and I did some reviews for both these devices, and I'll link them down below. But the V is essentially the H, which is why I opted to not really do a review of it, because it's more or less just a difference of form factor. And if you want a vertical form factor, this is the way to go. It has a joystick if you need it, and it's placed well, And I do want to mention both of these devices were sent by Lit NXT. They were happy to send them out, so I'm really appreciative of that. And you guys can check them out if you guys want to purchase any of the products that do have. Most of these products I'm going to mention, I'll talk about here on their website. You can order from them as well. So of the Anbernic devices that I have here, though, I will have to say that the SP is probably my favorite in terms of just the form factor this year. It's just so cool that you can just close it. It's clamshell. It's really easy to get to. The buttons are okay. I think when they first came out, a lot of people were complaining about them, but I had to make a point that yes, they are a little bit annoying. Like they're kind of stiff. The D-pad's kind of stiff because there's not much travel to it. And it feels really like hard when you press it. It's not like soft and mushy per se, like the all these other devices essentially. And so, it's just something to be aware of. I would say it's not like a negative or something that's like, hey, don't buy it because, the buttons and the, D-pad are stiff and stuff like that. So I wouldn't go that far. Now, the software, I haven't used the SP in a while because I had, the Odin 2, and that essentially basically made this my, all-time favorite, if you will, one of my most favorite used devices of 2024. But the SP, again, super good. You still have to kind of learn with any of these devices. If you want to get most out of it, you want to be able to flash custom software and then set up your ROMs, all that stuff. It all applies to all these. But I will say that default software for Anbernic is pretty good out of the box. So the experience is like, yeah, you can just use it and just play it. You don't have to think about setting up GUIs and making it look nice and stuff like that. If you're not into that, I don't think you have to go and do that, right? So yeah. So that all being said, right? So now we're okay. Now we're kind of, let's go out of that price range of the $50 to $100 price range. So let's go a little bit higher, right? When you go a little bit higher, what do you get that's the difference between all of these devices, right? I think that's what I would like to give you guys a difference or impression of the differences about without going to each review. If you guys want to get more details, but you can go click on those links below. But Retro Pocket 5, right? This is more of that $150 or $200 range with the 4 Pro and the 5. I'm not really going to show the 4 Pro because at this point, I feel like the 5 is kind of that replacement device successor. Really, it's a really true successor to the 4 Pro. But if you want to review or look at those reviews, I'll have them down below, the links below. So, but what do you get? So, better joysticks, buttons, controls. So what do you get that's better? Better joysticks, Hall stick, Hall effect sensors, joystick. So what do you get better? You get Hall effect sensors on the joysticks, better buttons. They just feel better. Essentially, that's really what the biggest difference is, right? Speakers are better. Triggers are better. I mean, the triggers on these guys they're okay. They're serviceable. The H horizontal one, it's okay. Not much travel, right? But they work. So you're essentially paying for upgrades, right? Just better button control, input control. Ergonomics, it could be argued, but I would say that, for example, these two devices, both horizontal devices, you'll notice that, yes, I think the 5 is definitely a step up from the Anbernic device here. Similarly, I mean, horizontal, again, or for sorry, vertical devices, it depends on if you like them or not. So, ergonomics are not really a thing on these type of devices, especially a vertical handheld. Now I would say that the ergonomics on this one here, the SP, is actually pretty good, despite it looking not that great. But this is kind of like an exception to the rule, right? All of these three right here, the top three, bad, okay ergonomics, but the E2 better. So those are the things you pay for, right? And then really the thing you probably pay the most for is the processor and the display. So the display on the Retro Pocket 5 is an OLED 5.5-inch display. It has a Snapdragon 865 processor, so way more powerful than any of these devices that, you won't be able to play anything past PS1 for any of these devices here. But the Retro Pocket 5 for about $220 can play pretty much everything up to Switch. Again, Switch is a little bit hit and miss just because of the state of things, but everything else, it can pretty much play everything. And so if you want kind of like, hey, I want to play everything, I want one device, I don't give a crap about, getting multiple devices or anything like that. I just want one, to play all my retro games. This is probably a good choice. It's a horizontal form factor, right? So ergonomics are pretty good. A lot of people had said, including myself, that the 4 Pro is okay ergonomically speaking. A lot of people had to buy, grips and stuff like that. I find it to be okay. Again, but I don't play it a lot, like full time. It's not like my main gaming machine. I have PS5 and PC, so I can play those. I play those a little more often. It's just whenever I want to play retro games, this is kind of where I go to. And one of the other thing is, when you step up from that price range, right, you get an Android experience. So if you have an Android phone, you'll be used to it, and you'll be able to just set it up as if it's a normal phone. And then you kind of have to do things a little bit differently compared to these devices. Just things setting up. Like right now, I have a, ESDE as my launcher. It's like an app launcher essentially, or your home screen essentially. It replaces your home screen, so it looks like a game launcher here, and you go in and you can choose the games. But then like all this stuff is actually what you see is not set up for you. You have to scrape all the art. You have to set all that up yourself. So there is quite a bit of a learning curve in terms of like, hey, I need to like set all this up, pull the artwork and make it look nice and stuff like that. But if you don't care about that, for example, Retroid does have their launcher, so you can just, use the launcher here that they come with. This is a new one, and you can set that up. I don't actually have it set up because I prefer ESDE that much. But if you guys want a dedicated like setup guide for Retro Pocket 5 devices or just like Android devices, let me know down in the comments, and then I'll set that up. But I've been planning to do that anyways. But I think that if you guys have questions or anything specific that I should focus on, definitely leave a comment down below so I can, incorporate that into the video. So at that 200-ish price range, right? Essentially, it's like almost like double the price of these devices. That's the kind of thing that you get. You get a device that's essentially feature complete. You can play any system that you can think of. And so okay, so then it's like, is there anything else? Well, I mean, there is. There's even more, premium devices like the Odin 2. This is like, going into that like $300 category. And it's like, why would you even get that, right? At that point, right? So think of these devices can play like, let's say out of 100%, it can play like 50% of games. I'm just throwing a number out there, right? Just to give you guys the scale. The Retro Pocket 5, a lot more powerful. It can play like 80% of the games, let's say. So you get, let's say, 30% more, right? You can play a lot more games. You play most of the games. Cool. So what does something like the Odin 2 get you? Well, this gets you 90% of the games, right? You have a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor on this Odin 2. And then you can get a Pro, and it gives more RAM and more storage, but you can just get the base, to be honest. But the biggest thing here is that you get more performance, right? So you get the latest and greatest Snapdragon processor. Technically, it's like from last year, but this device did come out earlier this year. So you're able to get a really fast processor. Joysticks, buttons, they're actually kind of on par in terms of quality. And you can tell that they kind of look similar in some ways. So the biggest thing, from these two devices, right? Like when you get to that higher end stuff, you're really asking for more performance at this point, like screen quality, all that stuff. They all kind of are in the same realm at this point of price range. So that's essentially what you're asking for. Hey, I want to be able to play everything, just literally everything. And despite what I just said earlier about the 5, right? It can't play everything. And the answer is a little bit complicated because of the emulation software that's used, right? So if you've never really gotten into this is like your first time watching a video like this, the TLDR is just that, the software to emulate some of these systems aren't perfect, and there's lots of reasons for that. And so if you give a device more horsepower, more raw horsepower, you might be able to just power through things. And that's kind of what the Odin 2 is. And that's kind of the state of these retro gaming systems and emulators and whatnot. And that's kind of where it's at, especially with like something like a Switch or PS2. Especially those particular systems, the developers aren't working on them anymore for one reason or another. And so you're left with kind of what they had last released. Fortunately for PS2, you can just power through it and you can play most games, but there's just a couple games that are okay, even on the 8 Gen 2 Switch in particular as well, since that's a newer system. So again, Android system, all of that's the same. You get some nice features with RGB sticks and all that stuff. So all of that stuff that you saw here, right, at that $50 to $100 range, you get here. Now, so at that point, it's like, okay, is there any higher? Yes, there is. Like, you have the Steam Decks. I have Steam Deck as well. You got the ROG Ally, Legion Novo Go. Like, you have a bunch of other devices, right, that are like PC handheld level and a lot more powerful and all that stuff. But I feel like that's a different category at that point. You can play retro games on those devices, but I feel like it's a separate category. I want to keep it to more of, hey, these things can really only play retro games. And so what would you get in that case? So these are kind of the options in terms of category. So it's like, okay, now what do you want to get? Do you want to get something that can just play everything like an Odin 2? Do you want to get something that's cheaper but can play a lot of stuff still? Retro Pocket 5. Do you want to play just really old games, PS1 and under? You have a lot of options. So as you notice that the cheaper devices, you have a lot more options for. But the more expensive ones, less options, generally speaking. So you kind of have to think about, okay, well, that's why I recommended at the beginning of this video to kind of pick two devices, a cheaper one and then a more expensive one. And I think that's kind of like the best combination because you can get like a nice form factor you can bring around with you when you're out and about. Because bringing an Odin 2, which can play everything again, is kind of heavy, big, bulky. It's not really pocketable, right? But all of these devices are kind of more pocketable in that sense. And then, or you can get something like in between. The Retro Pocket 5 is kind of like that in between. Hey, I'm kind of small. I can play a lot of games. It's like very versatile. It's like jack of all trades, master of none. But in this case, it's like better. We can play more games than all these devices, but it's smaller than an Odin 2. So it's kind of like an in between in that sense. So I think my recommendation is, hey, get one of these devices, get a better device, and then you can pretty much have an overlap of games that you can play all together and enjoy. So, if I had to give you my recommendation based on these devices I have here, I would probably get either one of these three devices. I would probably not get the Mio Mini Plus because it's very compact, so it's not really for everyone. So I would probably recommend one of these three. I think any of these three devices are really good, and these are good options. And then one of these devices. So between the Odin 2 and the Retro Pocket 5. So if you're a little bit more strapped on money, the Retro Pocket 5, at 220 is a very good deal. And then one of these devices you can get for like 50, 60 bucks at this point, I believe. And so, of course, shipping depends on where you live, right, in the world. So, I'm trying to leave shipping out of that because it depends on where you live. So one of these devices and then one of these devices. And then let's say you can only buy one device. Well, at that point, it really depends on the pricing. I think that if you are strict on pricing, I would probably get one of these three devices. Maybe the H is probably the best recommendation for most people. The V is a little bit harder to recommend just because it's like a vertical form factor. So you may or may not like that form factor. If you're nostalgic for it, then I think this is a really good option. But if you're not, you're like used to like mobile gaming or modern gaming, I think the H is a really good, really good main pick, really. The SP is a good pick as well. The screen is a little bit smaller. It doesn't have joysticks. So if you need the joysticks, I think that's kind of like the big differentiator between the two devices. This one has, a nice, clamshell. You can close up like that. And then I think ergonomically, it's better than the V, but again, it doesn't have a joystick. So if you need a joystick for some reason, for some games that you want to play, I think that's kind of the reason why to go with one of these rather than the SP. But either way, the Ambernix devices are really good options because they're low price, they're powerful enough to play, a good amount of games. So yeah, I think those are my recommendations. If you want one of these devices, I think, you're going to pay more. So it's harder to recommend just in general because it depends on the games you want to play. You want to play DS, 3DS, GameCube, PS2. I think you have no option. You cannot get any of these devices, right? None of these, under $100 are going to be able to play those systems well, if at all. So I think, the minimum, right, is going to be the Retro Pocket 4 or the 5, something in that ilk. There is a Ambernic 55.6, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that one device, it's a little bit older, and I don't recommend that one as much anymore, especially when there's a 5 out here who has that's pretty much everything that's better sticks, better screen, all of that, and a better processor on top of all that. So I think the 5 is really the recommended one in terms of like price to performance. But yeah, I hope this helps, gives you guys a better idea of all the devices out there in one video, gives you guys some recommendations and something to think about if you're considering this as your first purchase or maybe it's your second purchase and you're looking to upgrade. And yeah, but with that, I hope you guys enjoy this and I'll see you guys next year.